Hello everyone, it's your host and founder of the American Rail Club, Demetrius Villa. Should be online right now. There we go. Alright, let's start this. I see Ruiz Railroad is here. How you doing, man? Okay. Let's see if you all can hear me and everything is all set up. There's always something weird that happens every time I take my laptop out of here, take it on a trip, and just got back from Chicago late last night. So back here in Columbus, ready to rock and roll. So we got a couple things that we have on here tonight, and if you're listening or if you're watching this sometime in the future, we got a couple things we're going to look for. Number one is this Wall Street Journal report on Amtrak's inside Amtrak's dying long distance trains. It's about 7 minutes long. We're going to go through it, so we got enough time tonight. There's also another article here about Amtrak's upgrades to the auto train and what they're taking away. That's by WTOP. There's also an older video here that somebody sent to me about a man trying to get hit by a CSX train, which is pretty weird. And there's some other things as well, including Amtrak's new Siemens Chargers now on the Michigan line. Let's see what we got else here. Who else is on the chat? Hello, Cab Car 82 Productions. How you doing? And North Rails. How you doing there? Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this video, see what Wall Street Journal has to say about Amtrak's. This is what it's called, Inside Amtrak's Dying Long Distance Trains. So I'm going to go ahead and put a link to that over here in the comments so you guys can go ahead and see it. Okay, we got a whole bunch of people coming in. Hello, Jan Gorski, Transport Nerd 1022. Sean Blatzheim, how you doing? The Tired Scott, VK Banks, Train Supporter, Transit 94. Welcome aboard, everyone. This is going to be fun. So let's go ahead and watch this, see what it is. I'm going to put the link in the description below so you guys can go ahead and see this as well and get this going.
Long-distance passenger routes in the U.S. may be riding on borrowed time. Amtrak wants Congress
I love how they have to start with like some sort of song. It's like, we're going to get to the bottom of this case. Doom, 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 doom. They've been doing the same stuff for like the last 10 years. All of these, like, it doesn't sound any different.
Untie its hands and allow it to cut its longer, unprofitable routes, potentially halting service to rural communities. The company's management sees opportunity for profit and long-term growth in shorter distance travel.
Shorter haul, intercity service.
Okay, so a lot of this is where it's going into is that Amtrak is kind of weird when it comes to what the priorities are. On one hand, they're trying to improve rural services, but they're also saying that we want to focus in on short-haul routes, which would make sense because most of the money they're going to make is going to be from urban center to urban center. That's where most people are going to travel. That's where most people, going from point A to point B are usually going to take in. There's still a market in the United States where there's a lot of rural areas that don't have connections to, let's say, urban areas in the United States because they're very far away. For example, in places like Montana, for example. I mean, those are the type of stuff we're talking about. So let's go ahead and see if there's anybody in the comments here. Sean, I'm not going to say your last name here because apparently I didn't get it right, and it seems like nobody else gets it right. I'm quite sorry for that, man. Bob's over in Georgia. Someone's excited to start a rail channel, and that's North Rails. So if anybody's excited for that as well, go ahead and visit his channel. He's right on there. So let's go ahead and watch this and analyze more into what's going on here.
Service between big city pairs. It's the way of the future.
In the next year, U.S. lawmakers need to reauthorize Amtrak's funding. Members of Congress are coming under pressure to preserve cross-country rail services.
I'm afraid we're positioning rural America to fail.
We're beginning our
Penn
journey
Station.
from New York to New Orleans. We're riding a Acela train down to
Oh,
Washington.
I did get it right. Okay.
Acela is part of the Northeast Corridor. It runs frequently and usually on time, connecting business travelers between Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C.
So for those of you who don't know the Acela Express, I'm pretty sure most of you do know since we're all train buffs over here. So the Acela Express is America's currently the only kind of high-speed rail system that we have. It goes from Boston, as what the narrator's saying, from Boston to D.C., and it's a train that's capable of going 150 miles an hour. However, it only goes about 150 miles an hour over here in Connecticut for about 26 miles. The rest of the journey all the way down is about an average speed of around 60 to 70 miles an hour or so. Not that fast and not really high speed, but that's what we got. And most of that isn't really due to Amtrak's Acela, which they're actually phasing out that old Acela train set, and they're going to put in the new Avelia, which is made by Alstom. The previous train set was made by Bombardier, and there's a whole debacle of why that happened. So really the reason why it's slow is because a lot of this corridor and a lot of the rail and infrastructure there is super, super old. I mean, you have tunnels that are predating the Civil War here. I'm not joking. This is how bad it is. Correction, 150 miles an hour in Rhode Island. Yeah, so that's what it is. My mistake. So Rhode Island is where it goes ahead and goes to 150 miles an hour. Thoughts on the Avelia? Eric Krause is asking. I think it's good. And it's definitely a well-needed refresh for the Acela and for the whole Acela Express line there. However, really there needs to be more emphasis on fixing the infrastructure. But it's good that at least Amtrak has that, because the reason why they're phasing out the Acela is because all those parts have become more expensive. Bombardier doesn't want to support it anymore. So again, there's a new need for a new train set. So let's go ahead and continue on to this.
It's profitable, and Amtrak sees it as a model for future growth. According to a government commission, keeping the Northeast Corridor in a good state of repair will cost $42 billion. And
that's billions of dollars that they need in order to fix that up. And, again, a lot of that is the federal government doesn't really want to foot the bill for that. And a lot of state governments don't really want to foot the bill. I just got this report in right now from Indiana, where I'm living over here. This is where a lot of the money is going to, guys. So remember, I did a report I've done different streams and different videos about Indiana losing the Hoosier State because the state of Indiana could not foot the bill for $3 million, just $3 million, to keep the service running at a very anemic rate, by the way, because it's only running about 6 times a week. And when it does, it's running very early in the morning or very late at night. That's the time when most people are not going to really ride a train. You need to have more frequent services when people are actually going to ride it. So $3 million is too much for that, but let's go ahead and put $300 million for sports ball. That's what we're going to do. Oh, say, can you see? This is what's wrong with America. This is what's wrong. And look, and you go into this article, and I'm not the only one saying it. The plan includes $270 million from the state and local income and sales tax generated by several nearby hotels, diverting that money from the state, city, and local schools. By the way, we spent a ton on schools, and I already said this. We spent a ton on schools, but we're not doing it. We're spending the money is not where it's going to help out people. So we have a crisis where we're spending money on silly things. This is where our political corruption is going into. I mean, here's sports, and I know the NFL took out its non-profit status back in 2015 or whatnot, but I mean, again, these are major corporations that are making billions of dollars. But this is where we focus our money on. Let me see what else in the comments here that I can answer before we get back to the video. Let me see. What's up with the slowness and what's up with the Hoosier State? So again, I think you're just getting up with the Hoosier State of what's going on there. But the slowness, again, with Acela, it has to do with the infrastructure and how bad it is over in the Northeast Corridor. And our corrupt government continues to fund our road. That's by dumb stuff. Yeah, not just our roads, but other stuff as well that doesn't really need funding. And there does need to be more investment on electrification. Amtrak Cascades goes fast for 10 minutes, then gets delayed because of VNSF freight, like always. That's from Cab Car 82 Productions. Yeah, and we're going to go into that in this video. According to Minnovation Studios, Virgin Brightline is faster than the Acela, and that's actually correct. In terms of average speed, Brightline / Virgin Trains USA actually goes faster than Amtrak's Acela. So little do you know. That's more private funding. This is from Rennell Reed. As far as high-speed rail, private trains are going to be the way to go, and that's what I've been saying. Privatization is really where you're going to get a lot more power from companies to be able to do what they need to do, to be able to spend the money and the lobbyists that they need to get this going. That's what we see in Florida. That's what we're hopefully going to see in Texas. So let's go ahead and continue to see this video.
The Amtrak wants Congress to also invest in new service between cities that by train would be fewer than 4 hours apart.
So this was confusing over here because Amtrak wants to go ahead and fund a route between Dallas and Houston. So hold on, let's go back into that.
Also invest in new service between cities that by train would be fewer than 4 hours.
So that makes no sense because you have Texas Central Railway that's going to already build in that area. So why is Amtrak even thinking of doing Dallas to Houston? I'm not quite certain about that. So I don't know. Again, very strange that they'd be putting it in here. They'd be talking about Amtrak Dallas to Houston, but not about Texas Central Railway, which is, I don't get why Wall Street Journal didn't even bring up anything about Bright Line or Texas Central, but let's go ahead and continue.
Apart.
Dallas and Houston, for instance.
We spoke with Amtrak's executive in charge of strategy.
Amtrak's view is we've got a big opportunity.
All right, so this is Stephen J. Gardner. He is the VP and Chief Operating and Commercial Officer at Amtrak. So pretty interesting the way he says where the priorities are. And again, he's part of strategic planning. So why they're coming up with Dallas or Houston, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he even said that, or maybe he just said it as an example of, where city pairs lie, and maybe talked about Texas Central Rail. Because again, when newspapers and anybody does this, or when news outlets do this, they truncate a lot of time away out of an interview, because interviews can last about an hour or so, and they're really only going to get 3 minutes of footage into there. So again, pretty weird.
In these shorter distance corridors, the less than, say, 300-mile distance corridors, where we see a lot of our population growth occurring.
But is there an appetite in Congress to be spending more money on Amtrak?
Congress does recognize that trains can play a bigger role, and to get there, we have to invest in our assets.
Are you talking even?
Okay, so again, they do say that Congress, and again, most people agree that there needs to be more funding in transportation, whether you're on the right or on the left, or there needs to be infrastructure needs to be fixed up here in the United States. However, how we do that and where the funding comes from, that's where the differences sort of lie. And again, it's not really so in part of where the differences lie of how the funding gets to there. It's really the priorities, because once somebody gets into office, whether they be on the left or on the right, are they going to be really dedicated to infrastructure? And I had this talk with a friend of mine, Maurice Ball, over in Chicago, and I went to go see him over there. As again, he's also a member of the Midwest High Speed Rail Association. He's also on our Facebook group, American Rail Club. So if you guys do check him out on there, go ahead and say hello and give him a message if you want to. But we talked about this and saying that, when politicians go ahead and say this, whether they're Republican, Democrat, or whatever party there are, they all say, yeah, we need to fix our infrastructure, and they're going to go say, we're going to do a big spending plan and whatnot. But when push comes to shove, when they really come to that plan and really comes to implementing it, it never happens. And that's the problem. We don't have priorities straight. And you're never going to get it from the federal government. The federal government is never, ever going to put the effort to do this. This is why it has to come to the states, to private companies, and maybe a mixture of some federal government, but if it ever going to come from the federal government, absolutely not. Let's see some questions over here. American public infrastructure is a mess. We were built on the car. That's the thing. Again, America was built on the railroad. Modern America would not exist without the railroad. The car and the automobile and the roads only came after post-World War II. That's really where that proliferation came from. So again, this has to happen. Let's go ahead and continue this.
Even larger investments?
I am. Over time, we're going to need to invest more than we have.
The question now is whether its executives plan to also ask for money to maintain
Okay. I guess my girlfriend's coming in. Let me close the door here. Here come the dogs.
distance trains. In Washington, we board the Crescent Line to New Orleans.
So this is where most of the story happens on. They go from DC over to New Orleans on the Crescent Line, which is, again, it's a long distance line, and it's in terms of profitability in comparison to other lines, it's not as much. Yeah, the doggos came in, those darn doggos. Those doggers.
Pretty narrow hallway here. I guess this is home. It's a little smaller than I was expecting. This is a folding sink.
Yep, it's a folding sink. If anybody's ever been on an Amtrak train as much as I have, we all know the creature comforts of going on a long distance sleeper.
Look at that. Is this the toilet?
Yes, this is where you sleep. This is the toilet. Make sure to flush before you sleep. If not, be careful to breathe. Someone said here, Amtrak Wi-Fi is laughable. Yeah, it's horrible. Don't even forget about getting Wi-Fi. Let me see. Someone's not. If it's not letting you post a link, I'm not quite certain. Let me see if I can go ahead and. I'll go ahead and see if I can block that out. Try posting a link again. See if that works. Okay, let's go ahead and continue this.
As we ride south through Virginia, our dinner reservation is called.
The temperature on your steak?
Medium, please.
Medium?
Meals are included in the ticket price.
I'm gonna be honest. I've never seen a steak that good on Amtrak. I've never had. The green beans look the same. These green beans are horrible. I'm gonna tell you right now. They squeal every time you stab into them.
Better than what you get on an airplane.
Our junior roomette, one way, costs around $500, $250 a person. Coach seats start at around $100. Most Crescent passengers spend the 26-hour DC to New Orleans journey in this section.
So that's the thing about Amtrak as well that I was also looking at, is that the price when it comes to, in comparison to some airlines, I mean, it's pretty cheap to get an airline in comparison to some areas. And Amtrak tickets are pretty expensive in comparison to actual high-speed rail lines in the rest of the world. For example, let's say in Tokyo, I spent for one ticket on a Nozomi Express, so that's an express ticket to get from Tokyo to Osaka. It's about $130. On Amtrak for an Acela Express train that goes far slower, and it's nowhere near as fast, nowhere near as comfortable or as modern, the cost is about 3 times as much. You're looking at $400 for an Amtrak Acela Express ticket. So again, the tickets on Amtrak, some of the prices don't make any sense, but a lot of people take it because they don't want to take a plane or they don't want to drive. The driving is terrible here in the United States, and the experience of flying here in the United States has also become horrifying. It is horrifying to fly on a plane sometimes where your luggage gets lost, or you have some pretty rude people that work for the airlines. Not all of them. Again, not all of them, but there's some pretty rude people on the airline, so there's always constant delays, constant, just always BS, and getting into the airport and all that. It's horrible. You're treated like a criminal to go ahead and fly in your own country. You have to get pat down. You have to take off your backpack, take off your shoes, take off your belt. I mean, what else do we have to do? Strip down for the TSA? They're probably going to let us do that too. So that's the thing. Someone said here, dumb stuff. TSA only provides a sense of security. Yeah, that's the thing. The TSA fails 90% of the time. You don't know how many times, guys. I've accidentally got in with my little. I have like a little pocket knife, a little Swiss little army knife that I have chained up to my keys, and I've accidentally walked into there with it. The TSA fails. I know they've done studies on that 98% of the time when it comes to actually detecting weapons or detecting actual explosives, anything like that. It doesn't work. So the whole point of TSA even being there is mute. It's security theater. Yeah, they've caught 0 terrorists. They've caught nobody. Remember the underwear bomber? Went on there. They don't do anything.
Around 2:30 a.m., we stop in Charlotte, North Carolina. Last year, the city had the 5th largest increase in population in the country.
We have one train a day that shows up on a 2,000-mile journey.
Yeah. By the way, Charlotte is it's one of those up and coming cities in the United States. The Sun Belt and the Midwest are really two growing regions in the United States. As a lot of people are moving out of California, moving out of the coasts, moving out of New York. They're moving either to the South or to the Midwest, whichever's cheaper for them. Charlotte is a very good location. I've gone to Charlotte a couple times. Again, that's something that's up and coming right now. Let me see. If you guys have any links or anything you want to share, go ahead and share that. As long as it's not anything that rhymes with corn, we're all okay.
Maybe it shows up in the middle of the night. Maybe it shows up on time. Maybe it doesn't.
Amtrak says chronic, long delays aren't its fault. Outside the Northeast Corridor, its trains ride on rails owned by freight companies. It's battling some of these companies in the courts for priority right-of-way.
So this is the problem. Outside the Northeast Corridor, really where a lot of the delays come from Amtrak, that's when it's not their own fault. A lot of that comes from the freight railroads because, again, we have a law in the United States that passenger rail is supposed to have the priority to go on a rail. However, the freight railroads don't really listen to that, so they tell Amtrak to stop and let their freight trains come through. And that's the thing, again, it's a law, but the laws don't get, they're not enforced. So that's another problem with law when it comes to government, okay? When you have laws and you have policies and they don't get followed, what's the whole point?
Its freight fight notwithstanding, the company's leadership says its current long-distance services don't serve enough of a purpose to justify the financial losses.
Those scrambled eggs look good. I don't know. Maybe the cook on this train was better. I don't know.
In Atlanta, well, a station that's on the outskirts of Atlanta.
I know somebody here in the comments said that the station isn't in Atlanta, and that's another major problem with Amtrak. A lot of their stations aren't even close to the city center of where they're supposed to go. I mean, they do say that, let's say, for example, the auto train, which says you're going to go from DC over to Orlando, but you're actually coming off in Sanford, which is about 30 minutes away from the city center of Orlando by car, and then you're ending up in Lorton, Virginia, which is pretty far away from DC. When it comes to traffic, it's going to take a while to get into there. But again, I mean, the auto train's a pretty big train. It's it's a tall train, and you're taking cars along with it on that train, so you can't really go into the DC station and take that out. But again, there's some stations that they do come into, like for example Chicago, Indianapolis. Those stations are in or very near the city centers. I know Indianapolis is you're 3 blocks away from the exact center of the city. So again, that's how it works.
The sleeper train is the only passenger train that services this city. There's a 100-year-old woman who just got on board the train.
Dang.
Oh, always want to ride a train.
Always wanted to ride a train.
Annie Grissom is celebrating her centennial year by taking a day trip to Montgomery, Alabama.
What are you going to do when you get there?
I'm going to eat.
You're just going for lunch?
Yeah.
Do you fly?
I'm going to get on the train and go eat.
It's too high.
God bless this woman. I mean, again, even 100-year-old people want to take the train.
Too high.
Other passengers say that for them, this is no joy.
God forbid if this woman were to go on the TSA, how much they'd be taking her down and and patting her down and everything. I mean, that's why she's gonna take the train. She doesn't want to be probably ripped apart by the TSA. So like those are hyenas that work over there.
Other passengers say that for them, this is no joyride.
I'm too old to drive.
What about the bus?
Your seats are too closed. It's too congested.
Yeah, that's another thing. The bus here in the United States, taking the Greyhound or anything like that, that's basically a death sentence to you're not going to get sleep. You're not going to do anything.
You have seen a microcosm of the type of people that depend on long-distance trains. Their quality of life would diminish without this option.
John Roberts is a former chairman of Amtrak's board. He's now the head of Transportation for America.
This guy seems pretty interesting, John Roberts over here. So this is someone I'm probably going to see if I can try to bring on to the show in the near future. Because some of the stuff he says actually makes perfect sense. And I think with his advocacy group, I think there's somewhere that we absolutely, of course there is. We absolutely do agree that there needs to be better infrastructure in the United States. Let me know what you think in the comments below. We should invite Mr. Roberts onto the show, and we'll go ahead and see if we can get that done.
advocacy group for transportation infrastructure.
You see a lady that's 100 years old. You think she'd be making that trip by car or flying?
She's going from Atlanta to Birmingham. Let's say you had
Okay, so his full name is
Fine.
John
She's
Robert
going from
Smith. Okay.
Atlanta to Birmingham. Let's say you had more trains going between Atlanta and Birmingham. She'd have
And I think
more
that
options.
more trains between Atlanta and Birmingham is a good idea.
She doesn't need the Crescent if you had that.
There are people sitting here going to Slidell, Louisiana. So a train just to Birmingham doesn't get them to Slidell, Louisiana.
It sounds to me like you're saying the current leadership of Amtrak doesn't consider rural America to be a priority.
I think that would be fair to say that they don't understand the needs of rural America.
In response, an Amtrak official says the company believes in rural markets and wants to be relevant in every one of them.
Yeah, so this is where, again, the whole disconnect of what Amtrak is really doing or what Amtrak is saying that they're doing, it doesn't make any sense. This is where the confusion is coming in. What is Amtrak doing? For real. What are they doing? That's really where we have to look at and where we're going. And that's why really the future of American rail and passenger rail in this country is going to lie with privatized passenger rail companies. That's where it's going to go, because we know where Brightline is going. We know that they have a plan. We know what they're trying to do. And we know that's like they have a definite plan. We want to get to Miami, to Orlando, to go to Tampa, then probably up to Jacksonville. And we have some plans to maybe go ahead and connect up more towards the south. They even say Atlanta to Charlotte would also be a very lucrative route. And they're even trying to see if they're looking for a commuter type of rail between different cities like West Palm Beach and Boca Raton, Hollywood and Aventura. So again, where were they able to lie? Would that be a different service? So I made that in the last video about Brightline. So go ahead and check that out as well. So let's go ahead and say that.
Roberts helped mobilize congressional opposition last year to Amtrak's proposal for part of its Southwest Chief line to replace train service with buses. Company executives said the measure was necessary in order to avoid costly infrastructure upgrades and repairs. But senators from western states said not so fast.
Would you ever consider the Northeast Corridor being shifted to buses?
Amtrak backtracked, promising to keep the Southwest Chief running through.
So this was something that was bipartisan, that nobody wants to see trains downgraded to buses. Nobody likes buses, really, when it comes to that. Nobody really likes to take Greyhound bus or anything like that. If they could take a shiny train that was fast, that was comfortable, that gets you to point A to point B to where you want to go, most people are going to take that. 95% of people are going to take that, no question about it. So whenever you go to maybe like a Republican state and they say, we're going to take away your trains and put in bus service, most of the time we're like, no, keep the train. Unless you're over here in Indiana, then, again, let's go ahead and spend that money for a direct route for Delta to go ahead and take people from Indiana to, I don't know, the very, very inexpensive places like Paris, France, because most people can afford to go to Paris, France, which is not the Paris we've been looking forward in the last 20 years. And the way that's been going. I've heard some pretty bad horror stories about Paris, France nowadays. That's for another day.
End of this year.
They effectively said, no, we are not going to replace trains with buses.
They did, and we respect that. I think that we didn't fully have a conversation about the future of the network.
I don't know what he's saying, because he says one thing and then another. I'm not quite sure what Amtrak is doing here.
We didn't fully have,
or if the editors really, I don't know. This is strange, and I'm pretty sure any of you watching this can think it's strange. Let me know what you think.
Conversation about the future of the network.
In Meridian, Mississippi, about 3 hours north of New Orleans, Roberts invited us to get off at his stop. When he was mayor of the city in the 90s, he said...
And by the way, when it comes to buses, I'm not saying all buses are terrible. Most buses here in the United States are pretty bad. But I know in some places they work very, very well. Someone said over here that there's a Brazilian city that uses double buses, double-decker buses. I know in Hong Kong they use those as well to much success. So again, it where it fits, it works. Where it doesn't fit and they're just throwing it in there as an excuse to have something that doesn't really serve its purpose to the greatest extent, then it doesn't work. So again, It depends on where it works.
Said he led the effort to get this station built.
It tells our guests and our citizens who come home, you've come to a special place.
He wanted us to see Meridian's revitalization.
See, the question isn't whether the Crescent or any other train is profitable. The question is, does it bring value to the cities that it serves along that line?
So Mr. Smith over here, John Robert Smith, I believe that's what his name is, he was the mayor of this city in Louisiana, and look at how they were able to revitalize the city, or at least make it look good. They have a station that's actually worth something. It's not, just an outpost. You see some of these rural stations in Amtrak, they're horrible. There's some stations that I know that are just signs, and people are standing there on the dirt to get on an Amtrak train. But this is, very much worth its salt. And again, this is where we need to bring it.
Value significantly more than the very modest amount it takes to operate that train.
In the mid-2000s, Meridian restored its Grand Opera House. Roberts again credits the train.
What does that have to do with?
So it's Meridian, Mississippi.
This opera house existed because of the rail connection we had between Atlanta and New Orleans.
Amtrak's not talking about abandoning the South. To the contrary, it would like to have more than one train a day stopping in cities like Atlanta.
Atlanta is sort of the poster child of what I'm talking about here. And you think about all of the corridors, Atlanta-Macon, Atlanta-Charlotte, Atlanta-Chattanooga, Knoxville, Atlanta-Birmingham, none of which are served effectively by Amtrak.
Company.
So this is where it makes sense over here. That you have, again, there's so many cities. I don't know why it's not letting me pause over here. You have so many cities in the United States that have this type of model, like Atlanta, like Indianapolis, like Chicago, where you can be able to serve so many other cities around in the area, like Orlando. You can go to Tampa, you can go to Jacksonville, you can go down to Miami, you can go down to or up to to Daytona or Jacksonville or Tallahassee, Gainesville. So again, you have so many cities that can serve as central hubs to all over the place. You have Indianapolis. Again, Indianapolis is called the Crossroads of America for a reason, because the first Union Station was built in Indianapolis, and you can go down to Louisville. You can go up to Chicago. You can go over to New York via, through Ohio, through Pittsburgh, or you can continue on west. So again, you have so many cities like this that can serve as central hubs and be able to take people from places where, they thought it was going to be too much of a ride, or really connect, different urban areas that are 300 or 200 miles away together into a dense mega region. This is what you see happening in places like China, where they've been able to do this as well. So that's what we're trying to bring over here to the United States, because that's what makes sense. It fits over here. Let's see what we got over here in the comments before we go ahead and finish this video. Oh, someone's stuck over here. Yeah, there's the mascot over here. I was going to say, who's making all this noise? So, by the way, if you guys haven't seen, this is our mascot here for the American Rail Club. It's Hans the Dachshund. He's a long boy, indeed. I'm going to try to get him a Shinkansen costume for Halloween. See how that works on him, because anytime you put on any type of costume on him, the only time he runs is when he freaks out to try to get it off. Someone said over here, New York's metro is nothing like London or Tokyo. Yeah, Tokyo metro is by far the best metro in the world. Yep, he's an absolute doggo indeed. Best dogger. Yeah, he is a high-speed dog indeed.
Which are served effectively by Amtrak.
Company officials aren't saying yet whether they want their future network to include smaller cities like Meridian. But if Amtrak gets its way, cross-country routes, some more than a century old, may be split up.
I can't guarantee results. What I can guarantee is that at Amtrak, we're doing all we can to make these things happen.
Okay. That just threw in more confusion than anything else. So again, this is a company that says, we're trying to keep our rural routes. Or now they're saying, we're going to try to split them up. Or again, this is something that I've said for myself. Amtrak should probably either sell these routes out, or the state should run them, or there should be private companies that should start taking over these routes slowly but surely and trying to get them. Or Amtrak could be split, kind of like what they did over in Japan. They split up the Japanese National Railroad Company into different private companies depending on region, and those companies were responsible for running them. So again, it's a mixture of the government having a mandate to do that, and they were private companies, so they had to run like private companies. They had stocks. They had to pay their employees on time, of course, and they also had to, abide by what a company does, which is, to make a profit, to keep investing their money back into the railroad, investing it into new technology. And where it used to be before that, they had two iterations of the Shinkansen where they had the 0 series and the 100 series. Now they were making speeds of, they were blasting up the speeds instead of to 130 miles an hour. Now they're going up to 200 miles an hour. So again, private companies can facilitate that to put in the amount of research and development and the amount of investment that is applicable for a lot of modern countries. So that's what we need to do to it. And again, I think there needs to be some semblance of, I'm just thinking maybe some sort of advisors or somebody that they have over from overseas, like places like France or Japan or Germany, that we can be able to learn from and implement this here in the United States, because apparently we kind of lost that. There's some places, again, like Brightline, that is trying to bring that back, and they have had advisors from other countries as well. I have seen them. They've had people from, especially over in Germany, from Siemens. They've had advisors over from Switzerland as well. They had advisors from France. So they were really looking into and really studying how they could be able to bring that sort of system here. Amtrak, I'm not quite sure they do that, and from what it looks like, they don't do it. Yeah, Tara Shevchenko says, not France, they go on strike on days ending in Y. So I'm actually going to go into that later on. So okay, so that was that video. We're going to go into what Amtrak is doing about the auto train. So the auto train is a train that's pretty dear to me. This is the first train I actually did take of Amtrak. This is the first service I actually took going from DC down to Orlando, because our family did not want to drive back down the Northeast Corridor, and they did not want to go back driving from New York over to Miami. So we said, let's go ahead and take a train. And this was the train that we took to take our, Honda Pilot back on there and get, 2 adults and 2 kids back to Florida and drive the way back down from Sanford over to Miami. So what they're doing onto the auto train, they're actually upgrading the auto train, including a new dining car menu, better sleeping car amenities, which again, if you've seen the sleeping cars on Amtrak, they're not too fun. And an expansion of sleeping car accommodations. Because again, there's a lot of families that are going onto here. You're going a lot of them are going from Florida over to DC or to, over to New York. I remember that when we were on there the first time, we met a family that was over from Florida that they were coming to visit New York to go see Niagara Falls. So again, you have a lot of tourism back and forth either way, whether it's Northerners coming down to the south to go ahead and go to Disney World, or a lot of Floridians that want to go ahead and visit family or go tourism, because there is tourism in the north, to go up there. However, for Amtrak Auto Train customers traveling coach, dinner will no longer be free. So this has actually been going on a lot of long distance trains. For example, the Silver Meteor or Silver Star, you could only get dinner was only included if you got a sleeper car. So that's what it is. Let me know what you guys think about this as well. They're also adding a new cross-country cafe in January with more meals, snacks, and beverages on the menu for sale and its own seating. Though coach customers will no longer get complimentary dinner, they will receive a complimentary continental breakfast before destination arrival. So that's pretty good. And again, you can bring stuff on Amtrak trains. You can bring a whole ton of luggage. You can bring your own food. Unlike the airlines where, you start bringing in food from outside unless you've paid the nice penalty tax that you pay inside. What used to be a $4 burger outside of the same restaurant inside the airlines, inside the airports, you're paying $8 for it now. So that's what happens. Sleeping car upgrades also include better towels and bed linens. Like some of those bed linens on Amtrak are pretty bad. These upgrades represent an investment in improving the travel experience on this one-of-a-kind train. This is from Amtrak President and CEO Richard Anderson. And Richard Anderson is a former CEO of Delta Airlines. So, again, this is, what is Amtrak looking at here? Because first they said that, we're not trying to invest in rural routes, but we understand that rural routes are important, but we're investing in the auto train. So there's a lot of flippy floppy. We don't really know what's going on. So if there's anybody from Amtrak that is watching this channel and does want to have their input onto here, please, by all means, you're more than welcome on here. Okay, we don't bash Amtrak here all the time. We would rather that Amtrak was successful in the United States. It represents America's infrastructure, so that's what we want to do. Someone's asking over here, is it possible to build an alternate high-speed rail line from Boston to Washington, D.C. via New York? Yes, there is. It's called the Northeast Maglev. We actually did a interview as well, so you can go ahead and check that out if you want to. If you search up Northeast Maglev, fastest train in the USA, American Rail Club, that'll actually come up. So again, that's a different venture to go over here. So that's what's happening on the auto train. Let me know what you think about that. And again, because I already brought this up, this is where the government puts a lot of money into. This is what happens when you're freely able to put money and you have a citizenry that if they don't pay taxes, you can go ahead and put them in jail. So we all pay taxes for this. This is what happens. So that's kind of the point here. Someone asked here, Rail Brony, do you think Brightline will take over Amtrak? I don't think so. I think they'll probably get to a point where in Florida, let's say, for example, between Miami and Orlando, Amtrak will probably not be running that route anymore because there's so much of a shift in market share going on to Brightline / Virgin Trains USA. So probably where private rail lines come up and start taking over that service, Amtrak is probably going to start phasing them out because there's no way they can compete. And probably when it comes to ticket prices, it's going to be cheaper on Brightline anyway. It's going to be easier to go on there rather than drive, and it's obviously much less of a hassle and cheaper than going on an airline for sure. So let's also talk about this as well. I'm going to skip another video over here because that's an older one. It was more for fun, but I think we're having fun over here as well. So this is the new Siemens charger on the Michigan line. So this is from Delay in Block Productions. This is another YouTube channel over here. Go ahead. I'm going to put the link in the comments and the chat over here so you guys can go ahead and watch that video as well on your own time. But Amtrak has been making specific investments into their line, specifically trying to upgrade the old GE locomotives, which are, these are old, some of them 30, 40 years old. So now they're getting into Siemens chargers. Again, some of these stations, they do serve, or they're right in, some populated areas. So if there's enough of a crowd over there, imagine if you had a service that was, far more frequent and, connected to the places. People do want to, get on the trains. That's just what happens. So here, these are the old GE locomotives. And let's see if we can skip forward ahead. So again, there's people who want to get on the train. There's people that want this type of service. Let's see if we can skip forward. If you guys are, more of kind of rail foamers and whatnot, if you want to see the whole video, you're more than welcome to. So this is the new Siemens charger. So these are the same locomotives that they're also running on Brightline as well. These are Siemens locomotives that can run up to 125 miles an hour. That in service, the record for them, they can reach 145 pretty easily, and these are diesel locomotives, again by Siemens. It's just a German company, which is best well known for their intercity express train in Germany that goes 200 miles an hour. Yeah, and these are pretty fast. Yeah, someone's saying a Bible, the Wolverine service, they do go at 110 miles an hour. So that's pretty fast for American standards. I know everybody else in the modern world is running 200, 220. Some are thinking of 250. But for us here in America, we're kind of slow in more ways than one. So we're trying to catch up. We'll get there. They're a lot quieter and smoother, too, than the old GE trains. So again, there's investments happening over here, and this is especially important for the Midwest. So you can see Amtrak Midwest. So a lot of these trains are going to impact the service. They're going to be faster. They're going to be sleeker. They're going to be smoother. They're not going to break down as often. They have newer parts. Okay, so hopefully that works. So again, that's what we're talking about over here as well. So let me know what you guys think about it. The comments below. Let's go ahead and let this video finish up.
Looks like a lot of our cars are spilling water out all over the place.
Again, pretty smooth. Alright, so if you guys want to see that video, I put the link in the comments below. So go ahead and check that out. Yeah, Ruben was also, so if you guys don't know, Ruben Van Misero is also a administrator on the Facebook group and a good friend of mine. He also came over here to the United States for the first time this year to go ahead and check out the Midwest. And he rode on the Hiawatha as well, so talking about a 30-minute ride that he had on there, very shaky camera. But again, he very well enjoyed it. Renell Reed asked, could Amtrak Midwest be its own private company? Again, there's very good sections around the United States where you can go ahead and split up and say, yeah, this one region here could be its own private company. Again, the Japanese railroads did this, where you have JR Central, JR Kyushu, JR Honshu. Again, these are all different islands or different areas of Japan, JR East or whatever. That all these companies run different parts of it. So if I can get a map, let me see if I can go ahead to Google and look this up and show you guys. JR companies map. So this is what it looks like. So again, could the same thing happen for the United States where you have, okay, so JR Hokkaido runs on the island of Hokkaido. JR East, they run from Tokyo up to Aomori. You have JR Central that runs from Tokyo over to Osaka. JR West from Osaka over to Kyushu, Fukuoka. You have JR Kyushu over here. You have JR Shikoku, which runs on this island over here. So could the same thing happen in the United States where you have, let's say, let's get a map of the United States over here. Put a map of them. So again, you have Midwest, map of the U.S. regions. Could you have the same thing where different regions of the U.S. are kind of split up that these companies can go ahead and run? Yeah, absolutely. Now, depending on how that does, again, probably over here, I'd probably put, a whole company just for California and the Southeast. You have probably a Cascades region that runs over to here. So, again, this is a pretty silly map. There's got to be different, better maps over here. Yeah. Yeah, there's different ways that can be able to be done. And it can happen. So, is it possible? Absolutely. Will it happen in our lifetime? Probably it's going to be a very slow process. Now, where you see Brightline going on, Brightline has a very good chance of making this happen. Texas Central Railway has a very good chance of making this happen. And you have, let's say if a company comes up in the Midwest, they have a very good chance of making this happen. So you have certain populations that are very close to each other, where you have different city pairs that are very close in and around that can serve as a destination. So let's say, for example, some sort of company that we all know starts a line between Miami and Orlando. And from there, Orlando to Tampa, Orlando to Jacksonville. Maybe Jacksonville over to Atlanta, Atlanta over to Charlotte, North Carolina. And then branching out over here out of Atlanta, and then branching more and more and more. It's possible. It can happen. So it's all a matter of time and effort. And private companies, again, for a private company to thrive and prosper, they have to be able to put the investment back into the business to be able to keep making a profit, to be able to make their customers happy and keep moving forward. Again, that's how it's supposed to work in theory. And you have some companies that don't really do that, like the airlines. They rather spend their money in lobbying government to make it easier for them and harder for other competition to be able to compete against them. So can it happen? Absolutely. So, and this is, again, where we have it in California, the problem that you have over in California is that you have a very, very corrupt government over here that has, spent its way into debt, spent its way, and the whole state of California is falling apart. There's some people that beg to differ, and that's perfectly fine if you beg to differ, but you can't argue against the homeless rate and the amount of crime over in California. It's pretty bad, and the amount of people leaving California, and the way that the California High-Speed Rail Authority has squandered an absolutely fantastic opportunity to show the world that high-speed rail can absolutely happen in the United States. So again, that's what happens. And this is the thing about government sometimes. So someone mentioned here that in France, they do have a lot of strikes. So in countries where you do have a government-run system of rail, for example, France, where it's run under SNCF, which is the French rail company, when they have strikes, and strikes do happen often in Europe, the whole system shuts down. And this is what's happening over in Italy right now, where there's major transportation strikes that are hitting the whole travel industry. So a lot of Italy does have a lot of government-owned companies. For example, Alitalia is that's the airline company in Italy, of course, and you have Frecciarossa. You have a bunch of other rail companies, and again, Italy is a very good example of, and I've mentioned this in the last video, of between privatized and public transportation. Over in Italy, they have two different rail companies for high-speed rail. They have Frecciarossa and they have Italo, which if you look at the websites, let me go ahead and put that in there. So this is the train over for Italy, Italia Rail, Train Italia. So that's the government-run company. And then this, if we put Italo Train, this is the private company. So again, they don't have to deal with the strikes that happen over here because this is a private company. So they're much more competitive. They don't have to really do that. They do have to deal with sometimes when they have, I'm guessing this has to do whatever little bit of Italian that I do know. Again, anything that's to do with traffic with the other rail lines, they do have to deal with that. But in terms of strikes or whatnot, this whole thing is going to start to go down because, again, once the strike happens, they don't run, but they still do. So, and I know when I've read a lot of reviews and comparing both the companies, a lot of people would side mostly with going on Italo because, number one, the service is much more convenient, it's more on time, it's timely, and it's far more modern. So this is where you see the difference between that. Because what's happening in Italy right now is that you're having chaos going on because of the major transportation strikes that are happening in the country. Oh, here you go. Useful vocabulary for anybody planning a trip over to Italy in the next week or so. You got some let's learn some words, guys. Lo sopero, si opero, a strike. Cancelato, it's canceled. Ritardato, it's delayed. El rimborso, refund. I want the refund. Cambiarle la prenotazione, to rebook. This is all the stuff you gotta learn if you're going to Italy right now on a strike. This is the other thing that happens when you have government run sometimes, is that you also have, again, chaos happening. I don't know if this is connected well with I think it has to do with the strikes. And I'm pretty sure that there are some people that are striking against the government on some sort of policies that it's affecting. Yes, some 50 high-speed trains, including Frecciarossa, were canceled on Monday after fire on the line near Florence early on Monday morning. So, again, there was an arson attack due to this. So, again, is it all because of the government? No. Okay, of course not. But can it happen? Absolutely. I kind of feel like he's messing up on all these words. Yes, I am messing up on all these words. Someone says, it's a me, Mario. I want my refund. You're a pretty funny guy, Luigi. Because private companies have never had strikes. Of course, the private companies have strikes. The thing is that with private companies, you have more of leeway that you just, you fire people. That's what happens. So let's say we have about 4 minutes left. Let's answer some questions. How long is long distance trains versus short distance? 200 miles, 300 miles, 400, 500 miles, or longer? Usually when we say short distance, that's around 200 miles. And when we mean medium distance, most of high-speed rail is typically around 300 to 400 miles. That's what we typically call medium distance. Anywhere past that is more long distance. That's what it is. Jacob Heed, what do you think of British Railways privatization? I've been reading some books on it, and it was terrible how that was done. I mean, how do you split up companies that, okay, one company's going to own the rails in this section, one company's going to own the rail lines, one company's going to own the actual service, and one company's going to own the rolling stock. That's not how it works. The way Japan privatized it is that you have one region that's responsible for everything within that region. What happened in the UK is that you split up different you split up different parts of where it actually works. It's like splitting up a cog of a watch, splitting it apart and saying, okay, you're part of this, you're part of that, and you're part of this. How does that work? It doesn't, and you obviously see that in the UK. Eric Krause, are you a gamer? Very much so. I've been actually, the one game I actually have been getting into very recently on the weekend was Apex Legends on PS4. So that's been pretty fun. I'm not a type of guy to play battle royale games. I've been playing Doom recently. I've been looking forward to the next Doom, and the game I'm really looking forward to is Cyberpunk 2077. That's for sure. Maybe I should probably start like a live stream of gaming or something like that, but that's probably later on. This is more of a focus for me. Transport Nerd 1022. Do you think after Texas Central starts services that Houston and Dallas public transportation will start becoming more extensive and better? Absolutely. It's going to happen because as more people start to be going between city centers, probably those cities are going to start putting more investment into their service. I mean, you have DART over in Dallas. You have Houston that has their own rail systems as well. So again, that's probably going to happen. Let's see what else we got over here. Ruben Van Midro. So bit of an announcement, guys. For those of you watching, please join the ARC Facebook group. But if you are, do fill in the questions as well, because we do get some spammers sometimes, and we're trying to cut down on that. So it's kind of quality control. So make sure that you are answering those questions before you get onto the Facebook group. Let's see what else we got over here. Jacob Heap, what do you think of William Lind from the American Conservative? He's a big rail advocate and critical of highway subsidies. I'm not familiar with him at all. I'm probably going to go ahead and look him up as well. That's pretty interesting. Again, I'm very conservative, as you guys probably know, and I think it's hypocritical that, especially a lot of the Republican Party thinks that, we shouldn't be spending for rail lines, but we'll spend a whole bunch of money for roads. That's not at all how the free market works. It's not the free market at all. Let's see what it is. Let's see another question over here. How can we alert more young people about the benefits of high-speed rail? A lot of it has to do with, seeing what happens in the rest of the world. Show them some videos about it. For example, probably the best video you can show somebody who's young that wants to learn about high-speed rail. Couple things. Number one, show them the Shinkansen video, because that one's really good. I'm going to go ahead and link that as well, so you can see that. This actually has been pretty well. It's on the front page, one of the first pages of videos that you get when you check out. If you search Shinkansen, it's probably one of the first things you see, so that's pretty good. Again, you show young people something like this, which I'm going to put into the chat right now. You show them what happens in other countries. You see the amazing things that they've been able to do, and the amount of prosperity, the amount of freedom that it gives a population to be able to just hop on a train, go down somewhere that's 300 miles away, have a whole day trip over there, and then come back on the same day. Imagine having that freedom, and you don't have to drive a car. You don't have to worry about traffic. You don't have to be all weary and stuff like that. This can happen. Have you seen PragerU's recent video on why we can't fund for infrastructure? I haven't seen that. I actually gonna probably look that up. So I got my homework from you guys here. I don't know who's the teacher and who's the student, but it works both ways, I guess. So I got William Lind that I gotta look up. And I got a whole PragerU. I stopped watching PragerU after a while. They're more neocons than anything else. Really, they're just a gateway. More ways than one. How much do you think it costs to build a kilometer of HSR in America? Probably zero, because we don't use kilometers here in the United States. If you're talking about in terms of miles, depends. I did make a video about how much in New York that it cost. It costed $2 billion per mile for the Q train that they did there, the extension of it, which was pretty god awful. So again, there's a lot of money that's wasted in the United States when it comes to that, and it's not really, it doesn't make the service any better. Let's see if we have one more question over here. Do you think, this is from Connor Drogalis, do you think high-speed rail will work for people like ski mountains and amusement parks not near a city? That's a pretty tough question. Again, let's say if we're talking about something like Colorado, that's probably not going to work. Again, if you look at places like Japan, they do have train services that go to places that are very well known for, let's say that there are summer spots and also vacation spots during the winter, that they do have a lot of skiing over in Japan. And these stations are very much served for that. For example, there's one in Kanazawa. If you guys have watched Terrace House on Netflix, it's a Japanese show that's become pretty popular over here. It takes place in that's very popular in both the summer and the winter, as both a destination for like summer vacationing and winter vacationing, because they have a mountain there. It is served directly. The city center is served by high-speed rail just recently, so that can happen. But let's say if somebody is going from a city center and wants to go, let's say if it's 40 miles, 50 miles out to some place that is, recreational, then there's probably another rail service that will take them over to there. That's probably the best way it'll work. Let's see if we have another question over here, and then we'll call it a night. And we'll go ahead and I'll chat on and jump on here and see if there's any other questions that can go. Adam Booser has also asked, did you hear there is going to be built a high-speed rail service between Atlanta and Charlotte? Atlanta only has one rail station owned by Amtrak. Atlanta used to have a major train station, and that's absolutely true. So that can absolutely happen. Again, I think where that's going to happen is probably by Brightline. Once they start expanding up there into that area, they probably will do that service, and they have been in talks between Atlanta and Charlotte politicians of having that type of service. Highcast Infrastructure also asks, are you planning on collaborating with other transport channels? Absolutely. I do have that planned out, that I do want to go ahead and do with other transport and travel channels and see where that works as well. All right, guys. I think that's it. We're going to call it a night over here. Thank you so much for joining on the American Rail Club on this live stream. I think we all had a good time over here. And if there's any other questions, please go ahead and leave them in the comments below. Be sure to check us out on our Facebook group on the American Rail Club, and check us out on the Discord, Transport Central as well, which I will be on there as well. So thank you all for joining. We'll see you all next time. Take care.